Someone walks out of a store, arms full of groceries, staring at a sea of identical cars. Cue panic. Where did I park? Welcome, viewers. Today we'll explain the genuinely weird reason our brains fail us in parking lots, with humor, clarity, and cute doodles everywhere. Humans think memory is smooth, like water flowing, but your memory is more like lightning. One moment there, next it's gone. Suddenly, there's a chalkboard labeled Memory Game All or Nothing. Recent research from the University of York shows that when people forget where they parked, it's not because the memory degrades. It vanishes entirely or comes back with full sharp detail. There's no blurry memory fallback. Either you recall it precisely or it's gone. No partial details. 10 minutes after parking, you remember exactly. In 4 days, boom, gone. No half memory of maybe it was near the exit. You either know or don't. This is bizarre and frustrating, but maybe helpful. For your brain, erasing old, irrelevant info might reduce clutter, helping focus on important things. Walking through a parking lot doodle, the narration explains context-dependent memory. You park under a willow tree near aisle 5B. Your brain stores that. But when you return with new context, hands full, phone dings, different lighting, your retrieval cues fail. Memory retrieval often requires returning to the same environment. Cross one room, the parking garage aisle mark, and suddenly forget where the car was parked. That's the doorway effect. When you pass through a boundary, like aisle signs or building areas, it segments your memory flow and resets your brain's "where was I going?" filter. Your brain uses contextual cueing. Your environment's reliable layout helps locate things automatically. But in a parking lot, identical cars cancel out cues. No unique landmarks, like remembering your car stood next to a pink flamingo, means your brain's map is blank. We remember things that matter emotionally better. So if you found your car after an epic slip or dramatic cart crash, your brain remembers. But if parking was uneventful, it fades fast. Emotion anchors memory more deeply. A memory palace appears, walking viewers through the Greek mnemonic technique, showing how spatial anchors, unique sketches, sounds, feelings, help memory retrieval. If users imagine their car parked next to a unique doodad, say a yellow bike or green lamppost, they'll find it faster next time. When parking, note landmarks. Big red sign, tree shadow, elevator A. Mentally rehearse your location before leaving the car. This anchoring activates your memory later. If you see exit A signs earlier, your brain is primed to recall that area later. Primed context helps recall even unconsciously. A flashback shows groceries placed in one spot with a mental snapshot. Engrave it. When retrieving, the scene is recreated. The sun's position, the tree shadow, that odd parking cone. This reconstruction taps into the encoding specificity principle. Memory is best retrieved in the same context. Trying different environments strengthens memory. Drive into various spots periodically so no single cue holds. All areas become familiar, boosting recall across contexts. Brain old? Not really. Forgetting non-essential stuff like parking is healthy. It frees up space for important things, like where you hid the last snack. Key takeaways: parking memory is all or nothing, context matters. Identical visuals make recall hard. Emotional imprinting cements memory. Visual mnemonics help. And recreating context boosts recall. So why is forgetting where you parked such a universal experience? You'd think billions of brains around the world would have evolved a trick by now. Our memory systems evolved for survival. We didn't need to recall where we parked the mammoth, because nobody was parallel parking mammoths. Instead, we evolved to prioritize locations critical for survival: food, water, shelter, modern parking lots. They're all concrete sameness. Evolution never wired us to distinguish row A4 from B3 when both look like gray asphalt deserts. The forgetting curve plunges down while a tiny stick car falls off. If you parked and never thought about it again for 4 hours, that memory slid down the curve like a kid on a playground slide. Rehearsal interrupts decay. Every time you mentally picture your car's location, you reset the curve. That's why repeating it once or twice helps so much. Your memory isn't a photo. It's a web of cues, sights, sounds, smells. When you parked, you might have noticed a bright red car nearby or heard a song on the radio. Later, if those cues are missing, recall fails. Without that cue, your memory's anchor vanishes. Parking spots feel impossible to retrieve if other cars move or the environment changes. Our brains latch onto context, not just raw coordinates. The hippocampus has to separate very similar events into distinct memories. If you park in nearly identical rows every day, your brain might compress them together. Instead of 10 distinct car locations, you store one blurry, somewhere in the lot memory. Dopamine enhances memory when you're excited or rewarded. But parking usually lacks dopamine spikes. Unless you parked right before buying ice cream, then the spot burns into memory. Time pressure sabotages memory. When you park while rushing, your attention narrows to urgency. Encoding suffers. Too much mental load reduces working memory bandwidth. Parking just doesn't fit in. Walking through boundaries creates event segmentation. Each boundary tells your brain, new chapter. By the time you exit, the car location chapter has been archived so deep it's hard to access. Often the memory exists, but the retrieval key is missing. Something random triggers it, like spotting a trash can noticed earlier, and suddenly the vault opens. Parking recall is partly perspective. You need to remember later to recall where your car is. Without active rehearsal, the note falls off. Rats in mazes use spatial cues to remember paths, but if researchers remove distinctive cues, the rats wander randomly. Humans in sterile parking structures, same thing. Our brains need distinct markers. Create cognitive landmarks. Spot a mural, pillar, or even a crack in the ground. Always choosing the same side of the lot strengthens memory automatically because habits rely on basal ganglia, not just hippocampus. Random parking each day, lost and frustrated. We overestimate memory reliability. We trust our brains more than we should. Cultural quirks play a role too. Giant American mall lots versus small European cobblestone streets lead to different experiences. Forgetting parking is a reminder of the limits of cognition. We can solve calculus, build rockets, but remembering row C5? Nope. Summarizing, evolution didn't care about parking lots, attention lapses during encoding, homogeneous environments confuse place cells, doorway effect resets memory, stress and fatigue block recall, memory blends similar events together, and forgetting is adaptive brain hygiene. The real weird reason? Parking spots are too boring for your survival-obsessed brain. Unless a tiger's guarding your car, you're probably not encoding it well. You know what would solve this? Just write it down. But nope, our brains insist, I've got this. Spoiler, they don't. Overconfidence bias strikes again. That's why apps exist that literally mark your parking spot. Technology became the crutch for our lazy hippocampus. The phone guides straight to the car until the battery dies. Panic returns. Here's the strange truth. Forgetting where you parked isn't a flaw. It's proof your brain is prioritizing. It says, A, you'll figure it out. Let's save brain power for bigger problems. Your brain isn't broken. It's efficient, just ruthlessly practical. So the weird reason you can't remember where you parked? Because your brain decided it wasn't worth remembering. Next time you're in that ocean of cars, pause. Look up, pick a visual cue, tell your brain, this is where I park. Then when you step out later, you'll find your ride with a grin, not a panic. But here's another twist. Our sense of direction isn't always as reliable as we think. Scientists studying navigation found that the brain uses a special set of neurons called place cells and grid cells to map environments. Place cells fire when you're in a specific location, while grid cells form a kind of invisible coordinate system. Together, they give you a mental map. Except in a parking lot, those signals get confused because everything looks repetitive. It's like trying to tell one snowflake from another. Fatigue also plays a role. If you're tired after a long shopping trip or mentally drained from errands, your attention span plummets. Memory encoding is heavily tied to attention. If you were half distracted while parking, thinking about dinner, replying to a text, or stressing about the bill, you basically short-circuited the process. Later you return, and your brain says, "Sorry, we never saved that file." If you normally park in roughly the same area, your brain may default to assuming you did the same today. When you head to your usual spot and it's empty, confusion strikes. This mental shortcut is called a schema, a template your brain uses to simplify life. Helpful most of the time, but in parking, it can trick you into looking in the wrong place. If you parked while chatting with a friend or wrangling kids, you were multitasking, splitting your working memory bandwidth. Research shows multitasking dramatically reduces recall accuracy. You thought you'd just remember, but half your attention was on conversation, not car location. The mystery isn't that forgetting happens. It's that we expect our memory to handle flawless recall in boring, cluttered, repetitive environments. Parking lots are almost perfectly designed to mess with human cognition. And then there's the curious role of stress. Have you noticed how much harder it is to remember where you parked when you're in a rush? Stress hormones like cortisol actually interfere with memory consolidation. In survival terms, that makes sense. If you're running from a tiger, your brain doesn't care where you left your stone tools. But in modern life, when you're stressed about missing a meeting or beating traffic, your memory of parking gets scrambled. Later, when you come back, all you feel is that sinking oh no moment when every row looks the same. Another hidden factor is something called context-dependent memory. Our brains are wired to recall information better when we're in the same state or environment as when we first learned it. So, if you parked while sipping coffee and listening to music, you might recall the spot more easily if you're holding that same coffee cup and hearing that same song on the way back. Without those cues, the memory feels distant and fuzzy, as if your brain misplaced the file in the wrong cabinet. Even technology doesn't always help. Sure, we now have apps and car key remotes that can honk to reveal where the car is. But here's the twist. Relying too much on these tools can make your natural memory weaker over time. Psychologists call this cognitive offloading, when you shift mental work onto external aids. It's convenient, but the brain, like any muscle, gets lazier when it doesn't practice. That's why people who always use GPS for driving sometimes struggle to remember basic routes. They've stopped flexing their internal navigation system. There's also a cultural angle to this whole mystery. In densely packed cities, where public transport dominates, people drive less frequently and may have less practice with the mental task of remembering parking spots. Contrast that with suburban life, where driving and parking are daily routines. And you'll often find people develop little tricks of habit, like always parking near a landmark or repeating their spot out loud. Culture and routine quietly shape how well we handle this common challenge. And let's not ignore the sheer comedy of parking lot design. Architects may intend them to be efficient, but from the ground, they're just mazes of identical gray concrete. The numbering systems are often tiny, inconsistent, or hidden. Some malls have letters, others have animals or colors, and some don't bother at all. It's as if the designers secretly wanted to create a giant human experiment in memory failure. No wonder so many of us end up wandering with the same lost expression, remote in hand, silently praying the car hasn't been towed. When you pull all of this together, memory science, distraction, stress, schemas, environment, and design, It's clear that forgetting where you parked isn't just absent-mindedness. If this parking psychology helped you, tap that like button, subscribe for more brain hacks drawn doodle simple, and share this video so nobody else goes lost in the parking lot abyss. Comment with your funniest parking fail. I'll draw it next time. Stay pointed, stay remembering, and until next time, stick to smart parking. Hey, if you enjoyed this little brain mystery, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join me for more weird explanations that make you go, "Oh, so that's why." See you in the next one.